It's been a messy few days for the Labour Party. Between a botched leadership process and the sacking of the US ambassador, it's all gone a bit thick of it. Let's start with the sacking of now former US ambassador Peter Mandelson and the various scandals he's found himself embroiled in over the last 4 decades. His position became untenable this week after leaked emails between Mandelson and Jeffrey Epstein, that's right, the paedophile financier, hit headlines. While the now notorious paedophile was facing charges in June 2008 over soliciting a minor, Lord Mandelson offered advice and counsel. "Your friends stay with you and love you," he wrote in an email leaked to the Sun newspaper. Oh, by the way, he was also Labour's European Commissioner for Trade under Gordon Brown at the time. The scandal had long been brewing. Photo evidence of Mandy and the Big Pedo has been in the public domain for quite a while, but had been brushed off by Mandelson. He's known as the dark horse behind closed doors, by people who probably need to touch grass. And this isn't the first foray into scandals for Mandelson. Money was ultimately at the heart of Mr. Mandelson's 2 resignations from Tony Blair's government, in 1998 and again just 3 years later. His first departure, from the role of Trade and Industry Secretary, concerned an undeclared £373,000 loan he had taken from wealthy colleague Geoffrey Robinson to buy a London house, while the pair were in opposition. He was brought back in as Northern Ireland Secretary. Mandelson submitted another resignation letter in 2001 after it emerged he'd contacted the Home Office on behalf of a billionaire Indian-born businessman who was seeking British citizenship. It would be farcical to suggest Starmer and crew were blindsided by Mandelson's scandals, but it has been suggested that it was his Machiavellian tactics that forced their hand into rehabilitating him into a senior role. Known for playing dirty, as one insider puts it to me, an example of this is in the public domain, the Gordon Brown scandal, documented in Lord Levi's autobiography, where Prime Minister Brown accused the former minister and current European Commissioner Peter Mandelson of spreading rumours that he was gay. A pretty nasty rumour for someone happily married when affairs were the hot pick of the tabloids to splash on the front page. A bizarre way to tarnish him. Peter is the man that has had Labour in a chokehold for decades. To be self-aggrandising, here I am before last year's election on ITV, talking about his influence. At the time, Labour at large were denying publicly he had any involvement in the party. There is a conversation amongst people in the Labour Party, which is Keir Starmer, aided by Peter Mandelson, who is advising the party at the moment, that they're trying to pull away from the left and they are moving the party more to the right. And this is a good example of that.
Well, Peter Mandelson wants you to believe he's advising the party. Whether he actually is, I'm not so sure.
I have been in the presence of shadow cabinet ministers when they've had phone calls from him. By the way, I have it on good authority for a number of sources that there was real anger over that reveal. Maybe that death grip goes some way to explaining Keir Starmer's unequivocal backing of Mandelson just 48 hours prior to his sacking this week at Prime Minister's Questions. Leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch, in a dramatic change to past performance, was actually pretty strong this week, leading a forensic line of questioning that saw Starmer's catastrophic hammering of his colours to the mast.
While Lord Mandelson was Business Secretary, he brokered a deal with Jeffrey Epstein while he was Business Secretary, and that this occurred after Epstein had been convicted of child sex offences. Given this new information, does the Prime Minister really think it is tenable for our ambassador to remain in post?
Mr. Speaker, the relationship between the US and the UK is one of our foremost relationships, and I have confidence in the ambassador in the role that he is doing.
Of course, that wasn't worth the wood it's made of, because by Friday he was gone. Now let's talk about a little comparison here. I'm going to make you listen to a clip from Zach Polanski's Wednesday appearance on the PoliticsJOE podcast. Over the last year, we've seen 3 high-profile women sacked from Keir Starmer's government. We've seen Louise Haigh, who was sacked because of a fraud claim. She didn't hand back her mobile phone. She said it was stolen. Turned out it wasn't. Angela Rayner, obviously, with the stamp duty. And Lucy Powell was quite unceremoniously reshuffled out of cabinet just this last week. I wonder, in the vein now of looking at our ambassador to the US and his friendship with Jeffrey Epstein, Do you think his position is sustainable?
No, and I think Keir Starmer's chickens are coming home to roost. I think what we're seeing is northern working class women thrown out of the cabinet because they're not guarding him, they're not protecting him. But I imagine there's all sorts of scandals going on in that cabinet, and I think when we see the deputy leader contest, there's suddenly maybe going to be less loyalty to Keir Starmer. So it's just going to be interesting to see. We saw this a little bit in the reshuffle. People put in cabinet positions that I would argue probably aren't the best person for the portfolio, but are the best person for Keir Starmer if there's any kind of leadership challenge. And I think he's just looking to protect himself.
Both of those women resigned on arguably a dignified timeline that lends credence to all of that spouting of country before party nonsense. But Mandy held on to the bitter end. It's been reported that Starmer had not previously seen the emails with Epstein that emerged yesterday. We've also heard that the information was not available during the quote-unquote due process of his appointment, as they were from long-closed email addresses. Convenient. By around 8 o'clock on Wednesday evening, the position had become untenable. On LBC, you had Lord Maurice Glassman, who was integral to changing the party from Corbyn to Starmer, proclaiming that PT should take it upon himself to step down now, following the latest revelations about his relationship with Epstein. On the same channel, you had the former head of the Foreign Office, Lord Simon MacDonald, pointing out that the current situation with Lord Mandelson would be not at all helpful with the upcoming state visit. Unless, of course, you subscribe to the idea that Trump and Big Mand could have bonded over their mutual recognition in the Epstein files. Starmer made the decision at number 10 with his Foreign Secretary Yvette Cooper on Thursday morning. Just a bit of insider information here if you're interested. Yvette Cooper is married to Ed Balls, who was backed for the position as Shadow Chancellor by none other than Peter Mandelson. Despite high praise amongst senior Labour politicians for his work in persuading Donald Trump to secure the UK lower trade tariffs than the EU, it was ultimately the thing we already knew about that led to his demise. Now let me tell you about the imminent danger Starmer faces from the right, or faced, I guess, before this sacking. Not the Tories I'm talking about, the proper right, borderline far, but mostly what I mean is the groups that organise things like this Saturday's anti-immigration rally or the asylum seeker hotel protests. Mandelson had a little note in one of those advisory emails to Jeffrey Epstein. He said this would never happen in Britain. I've seen many prolific accounts pulling on that particular quote and pointing out that Starmer was Director of Public Prosecutions at the time, and conspiring it's because Starmer would have protected pedos. Obviously, that is totally ridiculous, and only on Elon's X could you get away with such a nonsense slur. But it goes to show how quickly the narrative can spin out of control when you're seen to be protecting the friend of a notable nonce. All right, let's get into the deputy leadership contest. So everyone who isn't Bridget Phillipson is rather vexed around the selection process. Here's John McDonnell at the TUC Congress explaining why.
In the normal practice, what you'd do, you'd allow a period in which MPs could go back to their constituencies, consult their members, their local constituency parties. That would influence them on how they're nominated. And then what you'd find is that the rank and file members would have a say. That's been cut out altogether. So literally, we've given a couple of days for MPs to nominate. So the membership now are not going to have any influence whatsoever on that nomination process. And what the leadership are trying to do, obviously, by curtailing that process, they're trying to almost have a coronation. So there'll be a chosen candidate, it looks as though it's Bridget Phillipson from the Labour leadership, and they're trying to prevent any other challenge, basically.
Calling freelancers, small and mid-sized business owners. Tide's Instant Saver account offers up to 4% AER variable, flexible access and competitive returns.
Unlike other options on the market, you won't need to hold your money with Tide for a fixed period. That means you'll have instant access and free withdrawals whenever you need it.
You can get started today with just £1, making it easy to start growing your business savings.
Want to know what you'll earn? Tide's Clever Calculator gives you a clear picture up front.
Our audience will receive £100 cash back when you deposit £5,000 within the first 30 days of opening your Tide Instant Saver account.
Use code JOE, that's JOE, JOE. New members receive an annual equivalent rate of up to 4% AER variable, free for 6 months. For the full offer, visit tide.co/Joe. T's and C's apply.
Alison McGovern, who you might remember from Monday's podcast, was the first to pull out. She was at one point in time seen as the government's favourite, but then that quickly switched to Bridget Phillipson. At end of play Wednesday, it was pretty clear Paul Barker and Emily Thornberry weren't making the ballot. Thornberry was the media favourite, but as I told you on the podcast earlier this week, she might be popular online and she may appear to have sway, but she did catastrophically lose a leadership battle to Jeremy Corbyn the last time she ran. The votes aren't there, girls, even though her stance has got a little stronger and a little more appealing to the members. Here's her answering a question to me yesterday on Gaza.
Listen, I think it's for a court of law to decide whether or not it's a genocide. If you ask me personally, it looks like genocide to me.
A couple of sources are now briefing that Belrabira Addy's first out the gates response to Peter Mandelson and calling for his sacking was the ticket to outpacing Barker so very early on. One union source tells me, and remember they're important because they need to decide on who to back to get them onto the ballot, said it certainly made things easier. It was tricky enough choosing between putting their weight behind a cabinet minister, bad optics, but a view into power and potential change, or a left field candidate who has been an active member of the trade union movement and stood on picket lines, let alone having two left-wing candidates to, I guess, Sophie's choice between them. Insider gossip from the TUC Congress. You might remember on Monday I mentioned Rosanna Allen Khan as one of the suggestions and possible contenders for the leadership race. Understand there was a ring round of affiliates to test the waters over whether they would lend her their support. Their decline or lack of reply led her to not put her name forward. For what it's worth, I think she would have been a very good membership candidate. As I said on Monday's podcast, she is an A&E doctor. She worked throughout the pandemic and she was ousted by Starmer, and she has a principled stance on the Gaza war. I think she could have done quite well with the membership. More gossip. A number of MPs who came up publicly for Belrabira Addy said they were pretty irritated and, quote, blindsided by Barker's announcement. One told me it didn't look good not to support a lifelong Liverpool trade unionist, but they'd already vouched for Rabira Addy and couldn't pull out now. So, let's look at the final ballot. You've got government choice Bridget Phillipson, who conveniently was at the TUC Congress this week. Now, I wouldn't want to appear a conspiracy theorist, but if that's the cabinet minister who was already scheduled to address the unions just before selection, wouldn't it make sense to put her forward? Rather than run the risk of the unions deciding say for example, Shabana Mahmood wasn't worth their backing as she hadn't bothered to curry their favour. Phillipson raced ahead with 175 nominations from colleagues by the 5 p.m. deadline on Thursday. And then you've got Burnham's pick, Lucy Powell, backed by 117 MPs. The left-wing choice, Belrabira Addy, secured 24 nominations, well shy of the 80 required to make it through to the next stage. I promised you all a drink along if Big Mand resigned. He didn't resign, so I'm under no obligation. However, I will do it anyway when I get back from holiday. A shot for every scandal? Or submit your ideas on the Patreon chat. Bye.
Thanks to Tide and their instant savings account for sponsoring this week's podcast.
New members receive an annual equivalent rate of up to 4% AER variable.
Our audience will receive £100 cash back when you deposit £5,000 within the first 30 days of opening your Tide Instant Saver account.
Use code JOE. For the full offer, visit tide.co/Joe. T's and C's apply.